You know, for decades, it's been one of Hollywood's darkest, most persistent mysteries: the death of Marilyn Monroe. Officially, it was ruled a suicide. But since 1962, there have been these whispers of conspiracy, of secrets, of power plays that reached all the way to the White House. So today, we're going to dig into the source material and try to piece together what might have really happened on that tragic August night. And this quote right here, it tells you everything you need to know to get started. This sets the stage perfectly. See, this isn't just the story of a movie star's tragic end. It's a story about obsession at the absolute highest levels of power. The men running the entire country were, as the source material puts it, all too busy with Marilyn Monroe. And that obsession, well, that's really the heart of the mystery we're trying to unravel.
To even begin to understand her death, you first have to understand the incredibly dangerous world she was moving in. It was this tangled web of politics, power, and yes, organized crime. And Marilyn was trapped right in the middle of it. So who exactly were the key players in her orbit?
And believe me, the stakes could not have been higher. You've got John F. Kennedy, the President of the United States, and his brother, Robert F. Kennedy, the Attorney General, and both were allegedly her lovers. Then, in the other corner, you have Sam Giancana, the notorious Chicago mob boss. He also slept with her, but he saw her as leverage against the Kennedys. And watching it all, or maybe more accurately, listening to it all, that was FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, who had pretty much everyone wiretapped. I mean, what an absolutely explosive mix of people. Okay, so keeping that intense cast of characters in the back of your mind, let's take a look at the official version of events. This is the story the world was told, and it's the one that started to unravel almost the second it came out. On paper, the report is pretty simple and just tragic. August 4th, 1962, Marilyn Monroe dies at just 36 years old. The coroner's ruling? A probable suicide from an overdose of barbiturates, which are a type of sedative. A terribly sad end for one of the world's most beloved stars. But that's not where the story ends, not by a long shot. And this is exactly why that official story has never, ever sat right with so many people. I mean, think about it. For a massive overdose from swallowing pills, you would expect to find some evidence, right? But the medical examiners, they found no pill residue in her stomach. None. There wasn't even a glass of water next to her bed to swallow them with. And her body? No injection marks. It all leads to this one huge, glaring question. How did a lethal dose of drugs get into her system? And that's the question that just blows the doors wide open on this whole thing. If she didn't swallow pills and she wasn't injected, what are we left with? Well, we have to start considering other possibilities. And wouldn't you know it, those possibilities point right back to that web of powerful men in her life. So this brings us to the first and probably most famous theory. This one puts Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy at Marilyn's house on the very night she died. The idea here is that her death was a horrible accident that was then immediately spun into a massive political cover-up, all to save his career. Now, according to a reconstruction by author Anthony Summers, it went something like this. Bobby Kennedy shows up at Marilyn's house to break off their relationship. She's distraught and she overdoses. An ambulance is actually called while she's still alive, but once she dies, that ambulance is allegedly told to turn around. Then the scene is completely staged to look like a suicide, and RFK is rushed out of there long before the body is officially found. And get this, a police officer even reported pulling over a car with Kennedy in the backseat, leaving the area after midnight. But wait, because the story gets even darker. There was an unnamed source who claimed to have actually listened to those infamous wiretap tapes from that night. And this source reported hearing screaming between Monroe and Kennedy. The tapes supposedly captured the sounds of a struggle, suggesting a physical fight where Bobby might have actually pushed her. Now we're not just talking about a cover-up anymore, we're talking about a violent final confrontation. And you know that political cover-up theory? It opens the door to an even more sinister possibility. Because what if it wasn't a suicide or even an accidental overdose? What if Marilyn Monroe was murdered by the mob? This quote, it's just bizarre and deeply chilling. It reportedly came from Peter Lawford, the Kennedys' own brother-in-law. When a former wife asked him how Marilyn really died, that was his answer. It sounds shocking, I know, but it's a critical clue in the theory of a clean murder that would leave almost no trace. Okay, so this theory suggests a truly diabolical plan. Mobsters who were already listening in on those wiretaps overheard the big fight between Marilyn and Bobby. After Kennedy left, hitmen snuck into the house while she was already in a drugged stupor. Then they administered a lethal dose of barbiturates, but they did it through a suppository or an enema. And that would explain everything. The massive overdose in her system, but with zero residue in her stomach and no needle marks. It would be a perfect, untraceable murder. But who would order something like that? Well, there are two competing ideas here. The first is that the mob boss, Sam Giancana, did it on his own to frame his biggest enemies, the Kennedys. But the second version is even more shocking. It's that Jack Kennedy himself, maybe even with his father Joe's blessing, asked Giancana to rub Marilyn out because she knew too much and was threatening to go public with their affairs, which would have destroyed the entire Kennedy dynasty. So, with all these explosive theories floating around for decades, you have to ask the big question: why has the full truth never come out? It really seems like the cover-up didn't just happen on the night she died. It's been going on for years and years. I mean, check this out. Back in 1985, ABC News had a whole segment for their show 2020 that independently backed up a lot of the work on the cover-up theory. But according to the source, the segment first got cut down from a half hour to just 13 minutes, and then it was killed entirely. The alleged reason: the president of the network at the time was a very close friend of Robert Kennedy's widow, Ethel.
And it's not just powerful people suppressing stories. Actual physical evidence has literally vanished. More than 10 years after her death, a new owner of Marilyn's house was doing some renovations and found this tangled mess of old wiretapping cables just sitting in the roof. Not knowing what they were or how important they might be, she just had them ripped out and destroyed. Those could have been the very wires that held the secrets of Marilyn's last hours.
And those lost tapes, as one author so hauntingly put it, they transmitted the sounds of her final moments to a place in history where they have never been found. The ultimate piece of evidence, the actual audio of what went down that night, is just gone forever. Which, of course, leaves us right here. Was it suicide, an accidental overdose, a political cover-up, or a mob hit? With all the main players now dead, and the most crucial evidence either destroyed or buried, so deep in classified files we'll never see it, the full story of Marilyn Monroe's death might just be one mystery that can never truly be solved. All we're left with are these haunting questions about fame, power, and the deadly secrets they can create.